Before leaving CSS, there are a few other things that I think are important for you to understand. You might want to apply a completely new style sheet to your site. Maybe you found another style sheet that you like, or maybe you just worked on a completely different one, and then when you're ready to launch, you're going to use it. So the first thing that you have to do is be able to understand the divs on the site and how they work so that you can apply them to your HTML page. You can grab this code from the sidebar of the tutorials, but I've put it here, grabbed it, and put it at the end of my style sheet, replacing the divs that we had for our IDs from the last style sheet, and I've renamed it style2.css. So in here you can see we have the same divs. We have header, nav, section, footer, and then one called main, and I'll show you why we use that in a second. And so we're trying to keep the same divs that we mostly have on the site, with the exception of this layout is going to allow us to have our navigation on the side and have it displayed vertically instead of horizontally. So there's a few things we need to change in how this displays. So in the nav, we see that we have it established with a 200 pixel width, so it's skinnier and higher. And then we have it floated to the left. And what that just means is it's going to float to the left within the area that it's located, and anything next to it is also going to float to the left, and that's why we have the section div that's going to show up next to it. It's going to be less wide than what we had before, so it could fit on the line right next to the div that we created for the nav. And then we have the footer there. The footer and the header are in relatively the same place. But we also have this additional div called main, and what that's going to do is it's going to contain everything on the page and center it. And that will show you that you're allowed to have divs inside of a div. Sometimes you might have a parent div that has to contain the whole page and apply some formatting to it. And so we just need to be able to apply that. Everything else is already applied on our page. Let's go back to our index page. And this main div, the way I have it set up is that I want it to contain everything on the page. So before the header div opens, I want to open my main div. And then I want to come down here at the end before the body closes and just close this div. And at this point, it's appropriate to start adding comments. Remember, these don't show up on the page, to let me know which div this is ending, because that will help as you start getting more divs on the page. Again, this doesn't affect how the page looks. It's just very helpful to you, the coder. So if I save this and then I come back to the actual page itself and refresh it, we see a layout that's starting to look now like this. We've got our navigation on the side instead of across the top, and then we have our content floating right next to the navigation bar. Now there are a couple other interesting things that I have created in this style sheet. You'll notice these rounded corners that I have on the top here for the header, and that's accomplished by using this border radius. And I've used the shorthand here, so that means that the left and the right are 10px, and then I have 0 on the top and the bottom, so those are square. And then you may also notice that I've got a little bit of a gradient showing up here, and that's accomplished by this background linear gradient, and I can establish the colors that I wanted to start with and end with. So these are kind of cool little CSS3 features that you can play around with, and I've got more instructions about those in the area below. In some cases, these are new features that need to have the prefix associated with the browser, and sometimes you have to have multiple lines added to be able to handle some of the newer elements. And that's why it's very important whenever you're trying out any of these new features, whether they're CSS3 or HTML5, that you test things across a range of browsers. So that's it. That's how easy it was to apply a different style sheet. And you can start to see the power of being able to use style sheets, because if we have an entire website that we suddenly need to change the design, maybe we have a new color scheme or we want to employ a brand new, fresher looking layout, it's much easier to do that when you have it established with certain areas of the page and certain styles that you can change in a global way. You can cascade them down to all the pages of the site. So work with your page and your entire site, all of the pages on your site, and get the design of the layout accomplished that you want. The next thing that we'll be moving on to is responsive design. So far, you have done all your layouts in fixed pixel widths, but we'll be moving on to much more flexible layouts so that your sites will look good on a range of devices.